The title of this is The Enemies of Israel. 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and Hebrews chapter 12. Now, why in the world are we going to the New Testament to find out about the enemies of Israel? Good question. Here's why. I'm not going to make a whole bunch of application. The most application probably I'm going to make is right now. Then for the rest of the lesson, it's just going to be facts. So it's going to be up to you, between you and God, to get the application. Because you can count on it. When His Word is passed out, He intends you to take an application from it. Rather than me tell you what the application's supposed to be, I'm just going to give you the facts. Then it'll be up to you and God to decide how you apply it to your life. Here's the most application I'm going to make right now. 2 Corinthians 2, verse 11. Paul says, lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. So the devil does certain things, and he does them repetitively. And that's how he gets advantage of us. He takes advantage of us because we keep falling for the same trick. So, you should study your enemy. You should know your enemy. In your life, you should investigate the times you've failed, the times that you've sinned, and then you see it happen over and over. Start investigating. How did Satan get me that time? And every other time before that. Okay, I'm going to start looking out for that. I'm not going to fall for that trick again. So we want to be aware of our enemy's devices. In Hebrews 12, verse 1, Hebrews 12:1, he says, wherefore seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. There it's made plain. There's going to be a besetting sin, and there's going to be weights. Things that are designed to keep you off balance spiritually, so that you can't function as a Christian. And it's very easy to see it in other people's life, because Christians, by and large, are playing with weights. They're out weightlifting when they should be running. And the weights they're lifting have nothing to do with what God intends them to do. So, in our life, that's where it's a little more difficult to decipher. In our own life, we need to decide, okay, is the devil throwing that weight at me, and I'm not supposed to be playing with that, I'm supposed to be running. So, we're going to look at the Old Testament enemies of Israel. I'm not going to make the applications. You do that. The Old Testament enemies of Israel. There's a bunch of them. Deuteronomy chapter 7. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 1 and 2. Deuteronomy 7, 1 and 2. Deuteronomy 7, verse 1 and 2, he says, When the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and hast cast out many nations before thee. Then he's going to list them. The Hittites and the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. And when the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them, and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. Okay, there's a list right there of a whole bunch of enemies that he's told them ahead of time. They're going to be sitting there waiting on you. Don't worry about it. We together, me in particular, God, is going to knock them out. You just follow the orders, and I'm going to take care of them. We're not showing any mercy to them. We're kicking them out. They're going to be gone. They're bigger and mightier than you, so expect to see that when you go in. Don't get worried about that. That's what they're going to be looking like. So, there's a whole list of them. There are basically 7 nations. That's what he says there. 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. There's actually about 13, 14, maybe 15 many nations that come against Israel throughout their time period in the Old Testament. There's 7 major ones. I'll look at them tonight, or we'll start looking at them tonight. Another place you'll find it is in Psalms 83. Psalms 83, verse 5. The whole chapter deals with the enemies of Israel. I'm going to ignore about 3 major enemies of Israel. Egypt, that's a major enemy of Israel. Babylon, that's an enemy of Israel. And Assyria. Both of those 3 I'm going to ignore. You'll see as we get into this why. Psalms 83, verse 5. For they have consulted together with one consent, all these enemies. They are confederate against thee. The tabernacles of Edom, and the Ishmaelites, of Moab, the Hagarenes, Gebal, Ammon, Amalek, and the Philistines, with the inhabitants of Tyre. Asher also is joined with them. They have holpen the children of Lot, Selah. That's a lot of enemies. Pun intended. There are all these enemies. Now, you'll see them over and over and over as you read your Bible. Because when you read the Bible, if you're going to read through the Bible, you're going to spend probably about a year trying to get through the Old Testament. And then you'll spend about 2 months going through the New Testament. So the majority of your time is spent in the Old Testament, and these names keep popping up. So it helps if we kind of have an idea of who that is. We see all these Ite nations, and we just, Perizzite, Hivite, Jebusite, and they just kind of all run together, and you just think, okay, enemy. But let's find out a little bit about them. When Israel entered into the Promised Land, it came with enemies. It was already loaded. 7 cruel and wicked nations. God commanded Joshua to wipe these nations out, and that's what he did. He made it clear they were vile, wicked, and God had no use for them. It's very plain. You read your Bible, you'll see that. They were to destroy them. If they didn't, those nations would corrupt Israel. And that's the same with us. We've got enemies. Usually that enemy, you don't have to look outside to find. He's right there in the mirror and in your mind. Your own devices corrupt you. Deuteronomy 7, verse 12. Deuteronomy 7, verse 12. Wherefore it shall come to pass, if you hearken to these judgments, and keep and do them, that the Lord thy God shall keep unto thee the covenant and mercy which he sware unto thy fathers. Deuteronomy 7:13. And he will love thee. You see that? This love is not unconditional. You've got to do this first, and then he will love you. Just wanted to point that out. And he will love thee, and bless thee, and multiply thee. And he will also bless the fruit of thy womb, and the fruit of thy land, thy corn, thy wine, thine oil, so forth, so on. It's just Christmas time. Everybody's happy. Verse 14. Thou shalt be blessed above all people. There shall not be male nor female barren among you, nor among your cattle. I mean, it can't get any better than this. Let's keep on, jump down to verse 16. And thou let's back up to 50. And the Lord will take away from thee all sickness, and will put none of the evil diseases of Egypt, which thou knowest, upon thee, but will lay them upon all them that hate thee. And thou shalt consume all the people which the Lord thy God shall deliver thee. Thine eyes shall have no pity upon them, neither shalt thou serve their gods, for that will be a snare unto thee. So there's all the good stuff. We're going into this land. You're going to get everything. You're going to be powerful. You're going to get everything a charismatic craves. It's all going to be yours. However, there's a little hesitation in it too. If you don't do this, you're going to be considered just like the enemy, and God will do you just like he planned to do them to them. It's hard to remember all of these Ite nations. However, if we can take a little nugget or two out of who they are and identify them almost like a personality, then when you read it, it'll come to life to you when you read that name. we'll break them down into two groups. The nations that were in Israel proper, Canaan, and then the nations that came from without. So Canaan, the land of Canaan, that was named so because of who? Cain. That's right. Very simple. Cain, Canaan. Okay, that's the grandson of Noah. That's Genesis 9, verse 18. And the sons of Noah that went forth out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan. That's that whole land, Canaan. So all of his children become little tribes, little units. Back to the show. That's Genesis 9, verse 18. So Canaan, the whole land, is named after Noah's grandson, and he is the son of Ham. So Ham is the younger of the three sons that Noah had, and Ham is the bad guy. We know about that. In Genesis 9:22, you get the story of Ham's wickedness. He does something wicked to his father. In the process, his son, Cain, is cursed. Because that's just the way God did it. Now, I say it's a curse. The Bible says it is a curse. God does curse. Now, sometimes what he does is prophesy that something wicked is going to happen. That doesn't, just because somebody prophesies something doesn't necessarily mean he's forcing it to be that way. It's just telling you what's going to happen. You jump off a building, I'll prophesy you're going to come to the ground. I'm not making you do that. I'm just telling you what's going to happen. Okay, well, this guy, Ham, was wicked. And more than likely, his whole family was already wicked. And so it's more than likely, just a simple deduction, they're going to be wicked. Okay? And because God's doing it, God can prophesy and determine, hey, I know what's going on in the future, and that's exactly what's going to go on. And sure enough, they're wicked. After the Tower of Babel, Cain's descendants took most of the land west of the Jordan River, along with Syria and Phoenicia. And then that's when the curse takes full effect. You start seeing it. They became very wicked nations. In Genesis 10, verse 15. Genesis 10, verse 15. And Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth. You can see on our thing, these are the sons of Canaan. Basically, that's what this little section of the Bible is telling you. I've just put it on a picture form so it makes it easy. The Jebusite, the Amorite, the Girgashite, the Hivite, the Archite, the Sinite, how about that? The Arvadite, the Zemarite, the Hamite, the Hamathite, so forth, so on. Okay, so there's all of those tribe nations that come out. But they're all descendants of that whole line of Ham there. And we know they're cursed, and they're very wicked people. And those end up becoming the real nagging foe of Israel their whole life through, all the way through the Old Testament. The problem with Israel was they never did fully put them down, wipe them out. And that's the problem with enemies. Enemies will always be enemies unless you destroy them, eliminate them, and then they're no longer an enemy. Israel didn't do that. They were, all these nations here, these tribe nations, were idol worshipers. Now, that's wicked. God does not put up with idol worship. That's one of those things that God doesn't deal with all the way through the Old Testament. He does not give any quarter if you're going to start worshiping an idol. It's very plain in the Bible. Even in the New Testament, he's still harping on about idol worship. There's a reason for that. It's going on right now, these days, in America, in full bloom. With the images and the icons and the pictures and all that garbage that's going on, it's still idol worship. And I go a step farther, maybe farther than most people will take it, but I say the tattoos are idol worship. It's a graven image, graven right on your skin. Okay, God doesn't give any quarter for that type of foolishness. The idol worshippers of these nations loved Baal. Now, Baal is a sex god. All of these gods go back to that. And very wicked, just like Ham. They're all having incest, supposedly amongst their gods. Their gods are having incest with each other. Very wicked. And that's what they're worshiping. Well, no wonder they're very wicked. The supposed God they have is wicked, but it's a god of their own imagination, and it's just like them. That's the kind of God you create unless you get one from the Bible. You get one just as wicked as your imagination. In Jeremiah 32, verse 35, I said I wasn't going to make any application. I started doing it. I got to quit that. Gone to preaching. We're just teaching tonight. Jeremiah 32:35. And they built the high places of Baal, which are in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to cause their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire unto Moloch, which I commanded them not, neither came it into my mind that they should do this abomination to cause Judah to sin. That's what they did. They sacrificed their own children. That's how far down the devil will take you. And they start off with one little thing that he thinks, or that the man thinks, oh, I'll get away with this. I'll get pleasure from this. And the devil takes that like a hook on a string, and before they know it, they're sacrificing their children. God knew these vile people would ruin Israel unless they wiped them out. He warned Israel if they didn't destroy them, the land would vomit them out. And that's the way he puts it. God says the land itself will be repulsed by the wickedness. And that's why I'm kicking these wicked people out. Because they're so sickening that the land is vomiting them. And if you get messed up in that mess, the land will vomit you, and it did. In Leviticus 18:28. Leviticus 18:28. That the land spew not you out also, when ye defile it, as it spewed out the nations that were before you. You're not that special. You can be spewed just as well as the spewer. In Numbers 33, verse 56. Numbers 33:56. I'm going to move kind of fast tonight because we got a lot of pages. So you may not be able to get to all these. That's okay. You can listen to them. Numbers 33:56. Moreover, it shall come to pass that I shall do unto you as I thought to do unto them. That's God talking. He said, I can make you my enemy just as well as I can them. It ain't no big deal for me. What you want to be? In Deuteronomy 8, verse 19, he says this. And it shall be, if thou do at all forget the Lord thy God, and walk after other gods, and serve them and worship them. That's that idol worship thing. I testify against you this day that ye shall surely perish. That's God talking. As the nations which the Lord destroyed before your face, so shall ye perish, because ye would not be obedient unto the voice of the Lord your God. So, they knew it when they came into that land. They were just there because God allowed them to be there, and they were something totally different, and they were supposed to stay different. God doesn't play favorites, although he does play favorites. When it comes to that, here's the way you do it. For instance, you see some kid out on the street, Now, you'll be nice to him as a human, but you're going to treat your son differently than you treat just some strange kid that wanders up. Okay, God's the same way. Now, that doesn't mean you're having favorites. It means one you've got a special relationship with, and the other one you have a different relationship with. That's the same way God was with all these nations, with all these people. Israel he had a special relationship with. But he was telling them, when it comes to punishment time, I punish everybody the same. If you want to jump into the be punished relationship, we can do that. In Judges chapter 3, verse 5, he says, "And the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites. They took their daughters to be their wives and gave their daughters to their sons to serve their gods." From God's point of view, they didn't give their sons and daughters to these heathen nations just because they fell in love and the heart wants what the heart wants. From God's point of view, the reason he says they did it was to serve their gods. God sees behind all of this stuff that we get fooled by. We think, oh, I'm so in love, I got to do this and this and this. No, you better control that love. You better control your heart, because God's adding motives to it that you might not be. Here he said they got married to these other, intermarried in these other nations. God says the reason they did it was so they could serve their gods. You know, nobody down there was getting married saying, I'm going to marry that woman so I can go serve that god over there, Baal. But that's the reason God was putting on it. God thinks differently than a man. We better change our thinking. In Ezra 9, verse 1. "Now when these things were done, the princes came to me, saying, The people of Israel and the priests and the Levites have not separated themselves from the people of the land, doing according to their abominations, even of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites. I want them to be Perizzites. The Jebusites, the Amorites, the Moabites, the Egyptians, and the Amorites." I got Amorites in there twice somehow. "For they have taken their daughters for themselves and their sons, so that the holy seed have mingled themselves with the people of those lands. Yea, the hands of the princes and the rulers have been chief in this trespass." So all the way up into the time that they're trying to be restored back to their land, it's still a problem. They're still too connected with the wickedness. Don't connect yourself with any kind of wickedness. That's the lesson of the Old Testament. Okay, here's a modest overview. I say modest, it's 35 pages. Here's a modest overview of each of the enemies of Israel, or the major enemies of Israel. The first category we'll have is the Canaanites. The Canaanites. And of course, they're all going to come from Canaan. The Canaanites were the dominant factor in the warfare and struggle with Israel. And why the land is named for them? Because of the descendants of Cain. They lived in the lowlands, the coastal plains from Tyre to Gaza in the south. So Tyre, you know Tyre. In fact, I got it right here. There's Tyre to Gaza, all the way down here. Gaza, I can't find it fast. Gaza, right here. So from here to here, from here to here, they're covering the whole, basically, territory on the coastal plain there. Cain was the father of Canaan, but also other nations, spawned off. The Hebrew word means humiliated or disgraced Canaan because of the curse. And that's exactly what it was. And they were traders. Being on the seacoast here, that would be your prime way of making a living, is getting things coming in or sending things out. So they became known as shameful merchants because they were underhanded any way they could be. In Genesis 10, verse 15. Genesis 10:15. And Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgashite, and the Hivite, and the Archite, and the Sinite, and the Arvadite, and all those otherites, all of them down in there. Okay, there's the whole list of them. Now we're going to see them pop up all the way through the life of Israel. And it's all connected with those ites. You can identify them quick, except for you might just see ite and it all gets confused. So we'll try to decipher which ite belongs to who. The first one we'll look at is the Amorite. The Amorite. Those are the talkers. That's what their name means, talker. You'll find these enemies, talkers. They're the descendant from Elmer, Canaan's fourth son. Now let's see. 1, 2, 3. Nope, that's not up there. All right, I've missed it somewhere. From the fourth son. They settled in the West Jordan River. West on the Jordan River. So down along this plain down in here, the Jordan Valley. And in the hill country. Also east of the Dead Sea. So they are in that area where Jesus Christ had his temptation. When Jesus went down for his temptations, he was being tempted down in here in the wilderness, but it was mountain wilderness. Down here on the other side, the east side of the Dead Sea. The Amorites were powerful. Many of them were said to be giants throughout the Bible. In Amos 2, verse 9. Amos 2, verse 9. It says, Yet destroyed I the Amorite before them, whose height was like the height of the cedars, and he was strong as the oaks. Yea, I destroyed his fruit from above and his root from beneath. He said if we were going to compare him to a tree, you'd think he was some great big, red oak. He was a big boy. Okay, those are the giants. And that's probably some satanic, we know from Genesis 6, there's some satanic wickedness going on to produce those giants. Joshua chose to serve the Lord in the Amorite conquered land. In Joshua 24, verse 15, it says, And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites, there's our wicked people, in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. These giants don't mean nothing to me. And he's seen them quite up close and personal many times. And there was one time he was ready, chomping at the bit to go fight them, and the whole congregation says, no, we can't do it. We'd rather go walk around a while. And so when he finally got the chance and he was the one in charge, he says, we're going. If you don't want to go, then take off and wander around the wilderness all you want, but I'm going. We're getting this thing over with. Okay, that is the Amorite. The Hittite is the next one. The Hittites. They were the descendants of Heth, Canaan's second son. Their name in Hebrew means terror. They lived in the hill country in Hebron. Abraham buried Sarah in a cave bought from a Hittite. David committed adultery with the wife of a Hittite. They also settled in the mountain areas of Turkey and North Syria. They went up north as well. And you find ancient relics of theirs in Ankara. Okay, that's the Hittite. I told you we're just giving you a little snippet. Just a little something to remember them by. The next one is the Girgashite. Now they're mysterious. Of all the names up there, they're a mysterious one. Their name in Hebrew is Girgashites. It refers to clay or soil. In 1 Kings 7:46, it says this, In the plain of Jordan did the king cast them, in the clay ground between Succoth and Zarthan. Okay, that's that Girgashite. Now, we see that in the New Testament. the New Testament, that name pops up again. It's pronounced a little differently, and it's not consistent in the New Testament either. In the New Testament, you find two names for it. In Mark 5, verse 1, he says, "And they came over to the other side of the sea into the country of the Gadarenes." That's that same people. In Matthew 8, verse 28, it says it another way. "And when he was come to the other side of the country of the Girgashites, there met him two possessed with devils," so forth, so on. So it's one of those names that floats back and forth, but it has the base root of the same, and it's in the same spot. It's up there around the Sea of Galilee. So that's where all those people settled down. Josephus says the name came from Cain's fourth son, Girgashites, however you say it. Moses gave command that the Girgashites were to be utterly destroyed. In the history, the Jews' history, the rabbis' history, they say that these people were run off by Israel. Of course, Israel's going to claim that. But they didn't destroy them. They ran them off, and they say they settled in northern Africa. Whether they did or didn't, who knows? Who cares? The Perizzites, only they're not Perizzites, they're Perizzi instead of an S. Perizzites. The Perizzites. They were with Abraham and Jacob in Genesis chapter 13, verse 7. Genesis 13, verse 7. It says, "And there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelt then in the land." Okay, so they're dwelling together there. And that's the beginning stages of it. In chapter 34, verse 30. Genesis 34, 30. "And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, Ye have troubled me to make me stink among the inhabitants of the land." Good, you needed to. If you know the story, you understand why I'm saying that. "Among the Canaanites and the Perizzites," that's them. Well, you don't want to smell good to those people. They're wicked. What they think smells good smells awful to God. "And I, being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house." Well, not if God's taking care of business for you. But they're even more of a mystery than the Girgashites. They live in villages in the southland and in the hill country of Judah and Ephraim. These people are kind of nomads. They don't have a specific territory. They kind of roam around. In Joshua 11, verse 3. "And to the Canaanite on the east side and the west side, to the Amorite, to the Hittite, and to the Perizzite," there he is again, "and Jebusite in the mountain over against Hivite, under Hermon in the land of Mitzvah." In verse 14 and 15, he talks about them again. "And all the spoil of these cities and the cattle the children of Israel took for a prey to themselves, but every man they smote with the edge of the sword until they had destroyed them, neither left they any to breathe." Now, Joshua forces them to do some things. When Joshua starts taking care of business, he's taking care of business. Joshua's an old man at this point. He's 40 years older than the rest of them. And he's been chomping at the bit for 40 years to go do this thing. And I imagine for 40 years, he's been plotting and planning how he's going to wipe those suckers out. And when he got the chance, buddy, that's what he did. Now, the Israelites themselves slowed Joshua down. If Joshua had had his say, there would have been none of them left. But by the time Joshua dies, there's still too much of the enemy still there, and there's too much lackadaisical, lollygagging around, and the enemies start really affecting Israel. "As the Lord commanded Moses his servant, so did Moses commanded Joshua, and so did Joshua. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord had commanded Moses." Okay, and they remained, these same idiots remained around. The Perizzites.
Was there a name in Hebrew that they meant? Clay.
Perizzites. Yes, it means
A leech that sticks on and sucks the blood out of you?
Maybe I didn't put it in here.
But it's okay. I just was curious. I mean, you got me going on names now.
Yeah. Yes, here's what it means. Their name means dwellers in open country. Open country dwellers. That means they're nomads. They just roam around wherever it suits their fancy. Now, if you go to the Middle East, a lot of them are that way still. They're just nomads. They pick up and move. What do they call them they call them gypsies. Gypsies, yeah. That's kind of what they are. They just go where the pasture looks green, only there's no green over there. It was desert. new plot of sand. They're right. Yeah, that's right. Another box of kitty litter. They're nomad shepherds, and they don't really live in walled cities or villages or anything like that. They just pick up and move around. Okay, and I think we covered, they were also around in Ezra's day. You find that in Ezra chapter 9. The next one we'll see is the Jebusite. The Jebusite. You'll never remember all of these things. I'm giving you too many of them too fast for them to really mean anything. But write this down, review it sometimes. When you see that word, when God pulls a word out and says, hey, Jebusite, go remember what they were? And then you can go look it up and refresh your memory. The Jebusite, they're the descendant of Cain's third son, Jebus. In Hebrew, it's trodden. They're on the mountain tribe living in and around Jerusalem. So they're right where you want to be. That's the good spot. There's one spot of ground that's special on this earth, and it's Israel. It's that territory. And of Israel, there's one special spot, even more specialer. And that's Jerusalem. And they had picked it. Jerusalem is a high place because physically, elevation-wise, it sits up higher. It's a high place. So it became an attractive place to be. That's where they are. You find this in Judges chapter 1, verse 8. Now the children of Judah had fought against Jerusalem and had taken it, and smitten it with the edge of the sword, and set the city on fire. Okay, so the tribe of Judah captures Jerusalem and burns it. This is when they're fighting against it to take it. This is before any Israelite has built anything there. It's just foreign. That's Judges 1, verse 8. Judges 1, verse 8. Now in Judges 1, verse 21, and the children of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusite that inhabited Jerusalem. Well, why not? Lazy? I don't know. Why do we not destroy our enemies? We're just lazy. Who knows? Lots of reasons. They didn't drive them out. The Jebusite that inhabited Jerusalem, but the Jebusite dwell with the children of Benjamin in Jerusalem unto this day. Now that's unto the day he's writing right then. David would later take it and name it after himself, the city of David. In 2 Samuel 5, verse 6, and the king and his men went to Jerusalem unto the Jebusites and the inhabitants of the land, which spake unto David, saying, Except thou take away the blind and the lame, thou shalt not come in hither. Thinking David cannot come hither. So they tried to pull a fast one on him. They put some lame people and some handicapped people up on the wall, and they said, hey, look, we got handicapped people here. You know, if you really want to destroy handicapped people, would you do something like that? He said, I don't care. I'm taking the city. You got them there, then they'll be in the way. They gonna go. And sure enough, David took it. And you can read all about it in that section right there. David also bought the threshing floor of Arnon, the Jebusite. He's a Jebusite. That's in 2 Samuel 24, 18 to 25. And I'm not going to read it to you. It's a long section. Solomon ends up building the temple in that very spot. But the Jebusite is the one who they were contending with over that plot of ground right there. Somebody else is also going to be an enemy on that same spot, and we'll get to them in a minute. But that's the Jebusite. I'm moving fast. We'll go to the next one. The Hivite. They come from Canaan's fourth son, and that means wicked. Yes.
How many fourth sons does he have?
Four of them.
I was just
You
guessing.
said the Ammonites were Canaanites.
Yeah, I've got four in there too many times, don't I?
And then you've got-
I don't know. You'll have to look it up. Look it up and find out. Count them. Yeah.
So he's a descendant of Canaan.
He's a descendant. That's right. He's a son. I don't know why I've put four in there too many times. Way too many times. I didn't count it.
How many wives did he
Four.
have?
Canaan. No. Canaan. I don't know. I don't know how many wives he had. That's a good question. Look it up. Find out. Very good question.
Way to go.
Very good question. So, let's see. Laura's going to tell us next week how many wives
I'm writing it down.
Canaan has. All right, good. This how we learn. They lived in the north, in the Mount Hermon and Shechem during the time of Jacob. You remember Jacob buys a well up there. This is the woman at the well. That's Samaria. Samaria is that territory. They were the same as the Gibeonites who made peace with Joshua. So these people up here also are dwelling with the other people in Jerusalem, what becomes Jerusalem eventually. They're all family. And so when they figure out what's going on, Joshua's destroying everybody. They say, hey, we're going to be gone. So let's pull a fast one on Joshua. And they do. And Joshua falls for it. So Joshua can't kill them because he's now duty bound to uphold the promise he made to them that he wouldn't. And that was bad on his part.
Yeah, he didn't seek counsel from God.
No, he didn't. He just got comfortable and said, this is a no-brainer. I don't have to ask God about this one. And he should have. Okay, they made peace. They made the peace treaty with Joshua. They are later Solomon's slaves. It's doing it again. Yeah, I know it made a little pause when I was trying to move my mouse, and I wondered why it was doing that. Solomon later has these guys as helpers to build his temple when he's coming in to build the temple. Because he can't kill them, so might as well use them. Joshua told them, you're going to be carriers of wood and water for the temple. That's right.
And hewers of wood.
Hewers of wood, that's right. And that's exactly what they did. They helped Solomon. They were the grunt. They were the workforce. And you'll find that in 1 Kings 9, verse 20 to 21. And one of this family, one of the girls of this family, also married Esau. So Esau's connected in there. In Genesis 36:2, it says, Esau took his wives of the daughters of Canaan, Adabah, A-D-A-H, Adabadabadoo or something, the daughter of Elon, the Hittite, and Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zebon, the Hivite. That's that Hivite. So they're all connected there. They're all wicked. Now, Esau was a bad character. He wanted to make his parents, he wanted to hurt his parents on purpose. So he goes and finds the wickedest women he can to marry. And where does he end up? Right here, a Hivite and also a Hittite. Under Joshua, The Israelites controlled most of Canaan, but they did not obey God's command to eradicate the 7 nations. They did a good job under Joshua because Joshua was forcing them to. But when Joshua's off the scene, nobody's there pushing them and prodding them. And we see all the stuff that happens. Separating the Old Testamentite nations into 2 groups helps you a little bit because that lets you know those are Canaanites. Ites, there's that ite. So now we've seen all of the Canaanites. That's nation number 1. It looks like we covered 6, but that was just 1. That's all the heading for 1. Now we'll get to some out of boundaries nations that come in and cause problems. We're going to cover 5 of those. The Philistine. Everybody knows the Philistines. If you mention who is the enemy of Israel, that should be one of the first names that comes to your mind, the Philistine, because we all know about who was that big boy that David had to take care of? Goliath, the Philistine. That's invader is what that means. Philistine, invader. They were a seafaring people. They came from Greece. Now, I don't think they came from Greece. I think they came from what's on the boot, the island just off the boot of Italy. Sicily, that's where I think they came from. Caftor is where I believe they came from. And I didn't give you all the verses to prove that, but if you just remember that name, Caftor, you can look that up when you get home, and you'll get 2 cross references. One will be in Isaiah and one is in Genesis, and you can figure it all out. Okay, so they're seafaring people, and they come in and they set up 5 cities. We covered that in detail several weeks. Gaza, Ashkelon, Ekron, Gath, and Ashdod. They all are right down here on the south in a little triangle pyramid area right in here. You remember that's where Samson goes and does exploits. Their advanced weapons threatened the agriculture of Israel. Israel came in, and Israel they weren't there to set up machine shops and, big city type. They were farmers and herdsmen. When they come in there before Pharaoh, Joseph says, hey, tell them you're a herdsman. That's your business, is to take care of sheep. I mean, how threatening can that be? A shepherd. Okay? Now, these shepherds have some supernatural power from God when it comes time to fight. But as far as advanced weaponry and that type of thing, they didn't study like that. That was not their goal. These people, the Philistines, that was their goal. They were, that was their goal, was fighting and warfare, and they loved it. In Exodus 13:17, it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God led them through the way of the land, led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest peradventure the people repent when they see war and return to Egypt. So what he's done is he said, look, the Philistines are a mighty, powerful foe. They're a good fighter. As far as just human is considered, they're fighters that are supreme. And that's not how I want to start Israel's journey. Not with that level of fighting just yet. I'm going to take them another route. So that's letting you know, as far as just on a human standpoint, they were good fighters. And that's what they did. Saul eventually defeats them, but not completely. It would take David to come in and kill Goliath to really put a hurting on him. And that's back in 1 Samuel 17. Eventually the Assyrians crush them, and they disappear from history. We don't have any Philistines around today. After the Romans crushed, now this is not biblical, this is extra biblical info. After the Romans crushed Bar Kokhba in the Bar Kokhba revolt, that's 132 AD, so we're talking here about 35 years after John in Revelation. Hadrian went to minimize the Jewish heritage of Israel and renamed Israel Syria, Palestinia. Now, that should start sounding familiar to you. The Latin for the Jews' ancient foe, the Philistines, or Palestine. So, when you hear them talk about Palestine, although I've not heard it in years, when you hear them talk about Palestine, it's Philistia. They're trying to name them Philistine. So that's bad news. And Rome started that. So there's some good stuff for you to think about. We'll start with Midianites next week, the Midianites.